Good morning, everybody. This is a new lecture within the series of lectures within the framework of the course entitled Introduction to Linguistics for S4 students. This is a new chapter entitled Morphology. Morphology is the branch of linguistics which is concerned with the structure of words, which means, in other words, it is concerned with how words are being formed. So it's the study of word formation, and word formation is going to be the main topic that we're going to explain through this and the next lectures. So first of all, we're going to begin by some questions that we're going to answer through these slides. The first question is, what is a word anyway? Of course, you notice that the key notion we're going to explain is the word. We think that we know what a word is, but when it comes to its definition, we find some problems. So we are going just to try briefly, of course, to explain the notion of a word. The next question is, what do you know when you know a word? Here we will try to explain the knowledge that the native speaker is supposed to hold in his mind about words. When we say somebody knows his words, or the words of his L1 or L2, what does he know? What is being stored as pieces of information in his mind about the words? And the third question that we will try to answer is, do you have to learn every single word in the language? Which means, if it happens that you are given the occasion to learn a second or a third language, or even while acquiring your L1, what do we acquire normally? Do we acquire lists of words? Do we have to memorize to remember every word? Or do we have to learn something else? Something else that's going to help us, learn the words in a general way. So these are the three questions that we would like to explain. Now, what is a word? This is the first question. Now, normally when we think about words, we automatically think about the division between them, for example, in sentences or in utterances. And this division is marked in speech by pauses. For example, I say are, pause, there, pause, pauses, pause, between, pause, words. So I am able to identify here that we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in this question, just because after each word I am having a pause. So in fact, this is the first criterion that we can take into account to define words. Let's have examples here. Adore, adored, amaze, amaze. What do we notice here when we pronounce these two words, adore and this word, adore? Here notice we have got two words, but here we have got one. But our pronunciation of both of them, does not make it clear whether we have got here two or one here, which means that we don't always mark the pause. The frontier or the line of division between and or. So both of them, adore and adore, are pronounced in the same way. Same thing applies to this case here. Amaze is just one word. Amaze is two words. But normally we don't make that division or that pause between the indefinite article and the noun maze. We don't make it clear, which means that there is no difference between the pronunciation of one word like amaze and two words like amaze here. So which means if we try to take pauses as a criterion to differentiate or to determine the notion of a word, we find problems. So it's not that reliable criterion. Now, still, we are, trying to explain further this notion of a word. Now, is each word a single chunk of meaning? So here we are taking another criterion by means of which we are going to define the notion of a word, is the notion of meaning here. Look, a word is a single chunk. It's a sequence of letters or sequence of sounds, if spoken, associated with a certain meaning, which means here we can talk about this one-to-one correspondence between a unit, a single chunk, and a meaning here. Now, does this help us understand the nature of a word? Let's have a look at this. Writer. Of course, according to the native speaker's intuition, a writer is just one word. But what about its meaning? Is it just one meaning? In it we have a person, this is one component, and who writes. So we have two different components here, which means that one-to-one correspondence between sign, the word here, and the meaning, a person who writes, is not straightforward, because we have got one word, but we have got two components as far as the meaning of it is concerned. Now, look here, the word lamb. Lamb, as far as its meaning is concerned, it can be, we can have two different components to, present, accurately its meaning. It's, first of all, it's kind of sheep, it's sheep, but it's not any sheep, it's young. So, young sheep here. So, although it's one unit, but it does not correspond only to one component of meaning, it's two. It's young sheep. Let me just add you another problem in connection to the notion of meaning here. Now, look, we can name some devices or some tools by some labels. So we have got one device as a meaning. Let's talk about toothbrush. Toothbrush. So toothbrush has got a meaning. What is the meaning of it? It refers to that utensil, to that device by means of which we clean our teeth. But in here we don't have only one component in the word. We have got tooth, we know it's one word, and brush is one word. So it's a brush that we use to clean the teeth here. So in fact here we have got normally two words combined to form one word, okay, and it corresponds to just one single meaning here. So in fact this one-to-one correspondence between a sign and meaning does not always work. So which means that the notion of meaning or the criterion of meaning is not that reliable once again here. Now the best way, or if you like the best definition, is to say that a word is a minimal free form. Minimal, it means there is nothing below it, nothing smaller than it, but it is free. This is the most important bit, free. This notion of free here should be explained further. Let us have a look at these examples. Words can't be interrupted. What do you mean by interrupted? It means that we cannot break a word, we cannot divide it into different units and insert something inside it here. Look, the word, we have got the hunters. Now, is it possible to break the word hunt in hunters into hunt and ERS? Look, it's possible to say the angry hunters. We have inserted something between the and hunters because they are separate words. So look at the place of angry between the and hunters. But is it possible to say the, hunt, angry, ERS? What have we done in this case? We have just broken, we have divided the word hunters into hunt and ERS, and we have tried to insert angry in here. What about the result? The result is unacceptable. Of course, this is shown by means of this asterisk here. Of course, from now on, the use of this asterisk before a word, before a sentence or phrase, it means that that phrase or that sentence is not acceptable here. Still, concerning the notion of being free, we can say that words can move as units. Let's have a look at this example to explain what we mean by movement. John called up his mother. John called his mother up. Notice the sequence or this collocation here. Call and up. The two go together. They form what you call a phrasal verb. Now, it is possible to break this collocation, to separate both of them by means of the insertion of his mother. And this is the result here. John called his mother up. But the result, of course, is acceptable. It is grammatical. Why does this so? Because normally here the word called is a word. It can be isolated. Up is a word. It can be isolated. It is a free unit. So what have we done here? Since up is a free form, it's a word. It can move from its place immediately after its verb. It can move to the last position of the sentence here. But what about this example here? John telephoned his mother. Is it possible to break tel and phone into two bits and insert something between them? For example, John told his mother phone. This is what we have done in the first case here. But the result here is acceptable. It's grammatical. But it's not possible in here because we cannot break a word and insert something inside it, because the result is unacceptable. John told his mother phone, because telephoned is just one unit. But if we break it further, we are going to obtain told. It's not possible. And found, okay, so the two, cannot be broken further, and we cannot, insert something, inside them here. Okay. Now, still concerning the notion of being free, we can say the relation of words to surrounding elements is not fixed, at least not entirely. Let me just, deal with the examples to show what is meant, what is being said in here. The happiest dog. The dog that's happiest. Look, normally we can talk about here the adjective and its noun. It's possible to change their order by inserting that's. Look, the dog that's happiest. It's possible. But if we take one, if you like, let's call it a unit from happiest, which is est here. Can we move it to the front position and try to, to break, to break this pattern and to isolate est from happy? This is the example here. The est, happy dog. It's not possible. You cannot est happy dog because this is the unacceptable. It's ungrammatical here. So, in fact, we should have this kind of fixed, let's say, pattern. The est should always follow happy, and it should not be separated from it in here. It should not be moved forward, because if we do so, we are going to obtain something which is ungrammatical. The est, happy dog. Of course, being considered free units, words can occur in isolation. They can be used alone. For example, what are they? This is a question. We can have as an answer to it, painters. So this unit is called a word, is considered a word. It is free because it is able to occur alone. It can be used alone as an answer to this question here. Notice no need to say they are painters. Now here it fulfills the role of a whole sentence. Same thing in here. What do they do? As an answer we can say paint. So no need to say they paint because it's understood, which means that paint can fulfill the role of a whole sentence here. But is it possible to say who paints? As an answer we can have ears. It's not possible because ears in fact is not a free unit. It cannot be used alone. It cannot be used in isolation. Okay, now let's talk about the knowledge of words. What we are supposed to possess as pieces of information about the words belonging to our language. First of all, let's talk about the nature of words. If words are arbitrary pairings of sound and meaning, they have to be learned. The key word that we have already explained is arbitrariness here. I think we have already explained it, and you know what is meant by arbitrariness as one of the design features of human language. But let me briefly just remind you of the notion of arbitrariness. For example, the word book, the form of the word which contains B, double O, K, or the sounds B, U, and K, here, I mean, this symbol, or we would like to call it a sign. Do you see in it its meaning when you pronounce it? Okay, when you use it in speech, do you see in it its meaning? Of course not. Same thing happens to table. Is there anything inside the word, the sign table, which makes you see its meaning? Of course not. So here the relationship between the sign, the word book, the word tree, and what they refer to, this relationship cannot be explained in logical scientific ways, but this is established by means of convention. What is meant by convention or norm? Here it means that people have just agreed that this word will refer to this meaning. The word table will refer to this surface structure, okay, being supported by 3-4 legs, or sometimes it takes other shapes. Now, this is as far as, let's say, the nature of the majority of words in language with capital L. Now, what is it that you are learning? What do you end up knowing? Since, this, let's say, relationship between the sign, the word, the form of the word, and what it refers to is not something that can be explained logically and scientifically. Therefore, our job is just to learn by heart the words and their meanings. The moment you learn a word, you should learn its meaning. Now, when we say we learn, in the case of our L1 words, we say to acquire. We acquire our words. What is it that you are learning? What do you end up knowing? So these are key things that we are going to answer here. What is it that you are learning? What do you end up knowing? Do you just memorize lists of words together with the meaning of each word? Or do you have to learn something else? And this is what we are going to explain here. So this is a picture, showing to us or representing the native speaker and what happens or what occurs in his mind. First of all, if we say that somebody knows the words of his language, he should know the sounds that compose the words. This is what is meant by the phonological representation of the word. For example, the word sat as opposed to cat, as opposed to that. So we should know that we have got differences in pronunciation that may be due to different phonological representations, or they may be due to differences in phonological rules. Of course, it's something that we may explain later on. Phonological rules can help us understand the differences in pronunciation of different words, different phrases and sentences. So, look here, the word cat. We should store as a piece of information the sounds that compose it. K, A, and T. Cat. Now, another component that we need to store in our mind about words is their meaning. Knowledge of meaning. A speaker has more detailed, subtle knowledge than a dictionary and a dictionary entry. Here we just, if you like, hint at the difference between lexicography and lexicology. Those pieces of information recorded in the dictionary do not actually reflect everything that the native speakers know about their words. Among the things that we can point out in this framework is variation in space. What is meant by variation in space? Languages do change from one place to another, from one time to another. So here, this gives us different dialects. So different dialects may attribute different meanings to words. Let me very briefly just give you an example from Moroccan Arabic. In Morocco, we have got the word trombia. Trombia, if you go to the north, Tangier, Tétouan, and others, this word refers to the bus. But in other regions of Morocco, it means top. Now, variation in time, let me just, give you some other examples. In English, we have got the same meaning, but it can, be named, or it can have different words according to different, let's say, what we call types of English. For example, elevator. This is the American word for the British word lift. So I need you just to consult your dictionary and to find an endless number of examples like this. Now we can also talk about variation in time. You know that languages change through time. Everything about language changes here. So we can talk about sounds, we can talk about words, we can talk about even about the structure of sentences that change through time here. For example, Old English is not the same English as we know, as we know it today, as modern English. Let me just give you once again another example from Moroccan Arabic to show you that the meaning of words can change from one period to another. The word al-khawar, the typical example I always discuss with my students, if it is used by let's say young people these days, it means something marvelous, something great. But of course, as it used to be, of course, when it was used by our fathers and forefathers, it meant simply something nonsense. So, in fact, here, when you know your words, you should know their meaning. And you should know, that they vary their, meaning from one place to another, from one period of time to another. This is it. Here we associate the sign cat, composed of the sounds k, a, and t, with the meaning. This is the meaning here. It's the animal. There is this close association between the form of the word, the sign, and the meaning here. We have also to talk about something else that we are supposed to store in our mind about words. It's the knowledge of lexical syntactic category. or part of speech. By part of speech we mean simply that a word is an adjective, an adverb, a verb, a noun, and other things. So let's have a look at the examples here. What parts of speech are the following? Gleam, gleaming, luminous, glow. Now, on what basis are we making this judgment to say that this is a verb, not a noun, this is an adjective, not an adverb, and so on and so forth? So here we have got, to have some what we call criteria. Let's look at these examples. The sea gleamed. This is possible because gleam is a verb and it gives us a well organized grammatical sentence. The sea gleamed. But is it possible to say the sea luminous? It's not possible. Look once again at this asterisk, because luminous is an adjective. It cannot be used as a verb. It cannot take this pass marker, the ed here. The sea gleaming, of course not. Once again, it's not possible. The sea glowed. This is possible because glow is a verb. So we can make the difference between different parts of speech according to the context in where they appear in the sentence here. I saw a gleam. Look at this indefinite article. We expect a noun to follow it here. So that's why we say I saw a gleam. This is possible. But is it possible to say I saw a luminous? And we stop. Look, this is not a noun. It cannot follow alone, of course, the indefinite article a. So the result is ungrammatical. I saw a gleaming. I saw a glow on the horizon. So here, we can make the difference between parts of speech according to the grammatical position that they occupy in the sentence. Let's have a look at this third example. There was a gleam. There was a luminous. Okay, so there was a gleam, haze. Is it possible to say there was a gleam, haze? No, because it does not play the role of an adjective. It's a noun. Is it possible to say there was a luminous haze? Of course, yes. Because haze is a noun, it should be preceded by an adjective. Now, there was a gleaming haze. It's possible. There was a glow haze. No, this is not. So this is another piece of information that we are supposed to have stored in our mind about our words. It's the right grammatical category, okay, or part of speech of the word. So this summarizes everything here. Knowledge of category. We have got the word cat, the sounds that compose it, the meaning of it, which is the animal, and its let's say part of speech, grammatical category. Now, you remember we talked about what do we learn when we learn the words of language. Do we need to memorize every single word? For example, do we need to memorize paint alone and to associate it with its meaning? Afterwards, we are going to learn another word, which is painter, and to associate it with its meaning. Same thing for painters, same thing for swim, same thing for swimmer. Do we learn words of our language in this way, as just words belonging to a long list, and we learn words in isolation? Each word is going to be learned, alone, one by one. But this is what we're going to answer. Do we memorize every single word? Or do we learn something else? This something else, what is it? So this is what we're going to answer here. Look, paint, paint, painter, painter, paint. plus er plus e. So in fact we are trying to look at the formation of this word paint, painter. It is composed of paint plus er. Painters, painters. We have got paint plus another unit plus another unit. So 3 units. It's possible to identify 3 different units here. Same thing, swim. Swim is just 1 unit. But in swimmer, it's not 1 unit because we have got in it swim, which is already identified as a unit, plus something else, er, swimmer. Swim plus er, swimmer. Now, swimmers, we have got the already identified unit, which is swim, plus this er, plus something else, s. The plural indicator, so swimmers. What do we notice here when we compare these 2 examples, these 2 words, paint and swim? We have got a similar pattern which is followed all throughout. In both of them we have got an isolated word, a unit, but this unit becomes longer. It becomes here painter, here swimmer, here painters, here swimmers. So, which means that we're going to talk about a certain morphological process or morphological rule here. That is, that identifies the 2 words and the rules that apply to them. So these are the things that we are going to explain in the next slide here. These general rules, these morphological rules that can help us, if you like, and that facilitate normally our learning process of our words. So these are the things we are going to explain immediately, in the next, lecture.